We've got a ruling based on the Associated Press saying this a moment ago. The judge has delayed a ruling on whether or not to dismiss President-elect Donald Trump's criminal conviction. These are 34 counts that came in at the end of May 30th. And the former president's been fighting it ever since. And the judge is going to sentence him prior to the election, then delayed it given the election itself. And so this is the ruling here. Just reading from the AP. A New York State judge has paused proceedings in the already decided criminal case on charges stemming from the hush money paid to a porn star. All right. The document reads, the judge had been set to decide by today whether or not the conviction could be vacated due to the ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court midsummer back in July on presidential immunity. Trump had also been scheduled to be sentenced on November 26. So this now is a whole new ball of wax. Ms. Dana.
Let's get Andy McCarthy up, and he can explain to us what this means. Is this kicking the can down the road? What does it mean, Andy?
Well, I think without having read it yet, Dana, my sense is that he's kind of cutting to the chase of what we discussed before, which is that, you know, you could have a situation where he made a ruling and then allowed on immunity and then allowed time for Trump to appeal it, which would tie it up for a number of years, because once he was president and was in office, they would be able to suspend the proceedings. It sounds like Judge Merchan is just leaping ahead to that conclusion and suspending proceedings while Trump is in office.
So this means when he's 83, the case comes back?
Yeah, well, if they deign to bring it back, I mean, look, it's a ridiculous case. There's a lot of reasons why it should be thrown out on appeal. Immunity is important to us for immediate purposes only because it's the only issue that's instantly appealable. But there's a bunch of reasons why this case should be thrown out. And I would hope that there'd be a good chance once President Trump is out of office as a twice elected American president, that at the age of 83, the New York authorities would decide that, you know, this case was already, whatever it was worth to them, they've gotten whatever value there was out of it. It was really only brought in the first place to try to prevent him from being elected. And since it didn't succeed, I think it should land on the dustbin of history, but that's just my view of it.
Andy, this is just, okay, you know, I have good, dumb questions. So does he have to continue to use private lawyers for this, or can the White House counsel's office take over?
Well, it's not necessarily either or, Dana, because he's got personal interests and there could also be public interests. So his personal interest is obviously his criminal liability. The public interest is whether having the proceedings interferes with his ability to carry out his constitutional duties as president. So since there's two sets of interests, there's no problem with having, you know, two sets of lawyers who work in their lanes on how this all plays out.
So, Andy, what I'm hearing you say, give me a course correction if necessary, is that in the year 2029, when this case is brought back or continued, let's say, he will stand a very good chance at the appellate level to have this case appealed and potentially thrown out. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, Bill. And, you know, you would pick up, I presume, again, I haven't read it yet, but I presume you would pick up right where we are now. And where we are now is we have a pending immunity issue. And as we saw in the Washington federal case, immunity, because it has to be fully litigated before you do anything else in a criminal case, or at least that's the way it's supposed to happen, it could take a long time just to sort that out before you get to all the other issues in the case.
Well, I'm just, you know, it's kind of letting it all sink in. You think that, I mean, I don't know Judge Merchan. I don't really know New York sort of internal politics here, but you know, Letitia James, she was full steam ahead, and you made a point in the 9 a.m. hour that she does have political ambitions. I don't think this judge does, but does a ruling like this keep him in the good graces of the judicial teams around New York, sort of his social circles?
I've thought, Dana, from the beginning that he's the kind of guy who, even when it's obvious he's made a misstep, he has a hard time admitting it. Like, it was clear, for example, when he let Stormy Daniels testify that that was a catastrophe that he shouldn't have allowed to happen. And instead of saying that was a mistake on my part, he blamed everybody else in the room for allowing it to happen. So he's not a guy who easily admits that he was wrong. It seems to me that this ruling allows him to continue that record. Basically, he doesn't have to deal with Trump's claims of error. He doesn't have to deal with the immunity issue. You know, he's the one who let the potentially immunized evidence into the case. Everybody on the planet knew that the Supreme Court was looking at this issue, and there was a chance that they were going to rule in President Trump's favor. So they were playing with fire by allowing this evidence into the case. He's the guy who let it in. So it seems to me that by freezing things in place and not having to thereby grapple with Trump's claims of error or the immunity question, he gets to basically not admit error, and everybody gets to carry on.
You know, you just wonder down the road, Andy, what does the world look like? What's the country look like? Merchan is 62 years old. He could retire before this case is finalized.
Yeah, but it's such a silly case. I mean, the whole thing is just preposterous, and you know, the fact that they brought it 7 or 8 years after most of the facts in the case happened, and it was brought by a district attorney who ordinarily pleads felonies down to misdemeanors. Here he took a nothing and it blew it into 34 felonies. The whole thing was so unabashedly political. I think you have to hope that 4 years from now, with a long look at it, people will, instead of saying, we got to get that case back on track, they'll say, how did we ever let that happen in the first place?
You know, you think, Dana, about this election and the results that we just saw, and heck, I mean, cases like this may have contributed to the drubbing.
I said on election night, it wasn't necessarily in spite of the lawfare that he won. It might have been also because of it. And National Review's senior writer, Noah Rothman, is on set with us now. And you've done a lot of thinking about the election results a week ago today. And wonder what you think about that in terms of the Democrats thinking that the legal cases were going to sink Trump, and they didn't.
Well, they thought that the legal cases were going to sink Trump as an adjunct of his personality, of perhaps his biggest liability for most voters, who exit polling suggests don't find him especially, some don't find him likable. They voted for him anyway. He's less popular than his Democratic opponent, who he beat. And there's an element of, for those voters, the majority makers in that coalition, who are saying to themselves, well, gosh, you know, the alternative to this is just less palatable than a Donald Trump presidency for all his faults and flaws. I would like to ask Andy, to the extent that he can speculate, what extent, or what Donald Trump is going to do about these outstanding indictments against him at the federal level. Is he going to simply withdraw the Jack Smith's office, to withdraw the special prosecutor and live under indictment, or move forward and pardon himself? Because if the latter course is what he moves forward with, that could reignite a lot of the opposition to him as a person, personally.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know one way or the other, but it's the ball's in his court.
I get the sense that what's going to happen is the Biden-Harris administration is going to dismiss the Trump cases. They've already sort of laid the groundwork for that. Judge Chutkan has set, I think, December 2nd as a date for Jack Smith to get back to her on how he sees the case proceeding in the future. I think what he'll come back with is a motion to dismiss the case. My sense of this is that, and I continue to think this even though the White House pushes back the other way, I think that President Biden is going to pardon his son, and that he will get a lot of criticism if that's done in a vacuum, because it's a form of self-dealing, and he also said he wouldn't do it, so he'll look terrible. But I think if it's pitched to the country as kind of a clemency package, where we're turning the page from the Trump prosecutions and turning the page from the Hunter prosecution, the country will take it a lot better. So I think it's going to be the Biden-Harris administration that gets rid of the Trump prosecutions, rather than having Trump have to do it himself by getting his Justice Department to try to dismiss it.
Do you think they would cut that deal, Andy?
I do. Yep. I don't see who's the loser in it, though.
I do too.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.